Yes. Hello, this is Martin Brossman, and
This is Elise Archer.
you are joining us on Linking into Sales, the social selling podcast, and we have an exciting guest today we'll get to shortly, but we want to just begin by mentioning that, and Greg Heyer is also going to be joining us, so he'll be popping in as we go. But we want to first begin by mentioning our sponsor, which is NC State Technology Training Solutions. If you're looking for training resources, from everything from power using of Excel to how to develop apps to a social media management certificate program that I teach with Karen, along with our social selling course that Greg Heyer and I teach over there. Check them out. It's a really good resource. You can learn more about it at linkingintosales.com, NCSUTTS. So that's linkingintosales.com, capital letters NCSUTTS, and you can learn more about it. It'll be in the show notes as well. If you check them out, let them know you came from our show. We are so excited today to have our new guest, and Jill, I want to make sure we get the pronunciation of your last name correctly. So would you just say it?
Yeah, sure, Martin and Elise. I'm excited to be here and glad that Greg will be joining as well. I am Jill Rowley, like growl.
That's great. Jill Rowley, it is fantastic. You're a powerhouse in the social selling and a passionate advocate for it. And I'd love if you just mention a little bit about your core passions, and then we're going to get right into the meat of the show. And today's really getting another perspective on social selling from yours, because you've been speaking to a lot of corporations on this topic. Over to you.
Sure, thanks. So I, in my 22-year career, I spent 6 years in consulting, 52 quarters on quota as an individual quota-carrying sales rep at Salesforce and Eloqua. Then I spent about a year at Oracle designing really a training program for social selling. I was evangelizing the why, the what, and starting to build the curriculum around the how-to do social selling. But then for the past 2 years, I'm on my own. I own my own business. I am all of the employees, and I work with companies to help them really with the mindset shift that's required to be successful in our modern buyer world, the skill set that's required for the sales organization, and the enabling toolkit that they need to be visible and valuable to the modern buyer. I'm so fired up to be here today. Thank you so much for having me as a guest on the show.
Yeah, we're excited too, and we'll open with I'll start a question, and then Elise will let you take to the next one. But we'll start with would you give us your definition of what is social selling? Because it's been evolving in the number of years. Some say relationships where you use all the technology of the web, but I want to hear what yours is.
Sure. So I was a social seller as an individual rep. And my definition of social selling has been shaped based on my experience. And now my experience where I'm trying to communicate what the heck, social selling is. So I have a definition. I'm consistent, whether I'm right or wrong, I'm consistent. And let me tell you the short definition, and I can expand on it later. But it's using social networks. I use the word networks when I'm talking to salespeople, not social media. So it's using social networks like LinkedIn, like Twitter, to do research on the buyer, the buying committee, the sphere of influence of the buying committee. So using these networks to do research so you can be relevant, so you can build relationships that ultimately drive revenue. Revenue, customer lifetime value, advocacy. So it's using these networks initially to find, listen, relate, connect, engage, and amplify your buyers. But done well over time, social selling is about being found by your buyers because of the information that you're putting out via the web, demonstrating subject matter expertise, and that you are a resource for your buyers, not an allergy that your buyers are trying to prevent happening. So that was actually a little bit longer, but it's research to be relevant to build relationships that drive revenue.
Excellent, excellent. Great job. Lisa, I'll pass it over to you for something.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I love that. The 4 R's.
The Rowley way.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. I'm curious, I think we all know intrinsically that, okay, if I'm a sales rep and I'm using social selling, I have a competitive advantage over my colleagues who may not have mastered it yet. I'm curious if you can dig deeper, though, into that competitive advantage. So if Joe is usually using social selling and Bob isn't, do we have any data around what that competitive advantage is? Or can you just elaborate a little bit more on what that would look like? Like, why is Joe going to be better off?
Yeah, sure. So I have the benefit of literally every day, part of my job is to get smarter about social selling, about what the analysts are finding in their research, about what the vendors are finding in their research and in their work with customers. So part of my job is to be smart on the topic. And I've been reading Aberdeen Group, Forrester Research, Serious Decisions, Gartner, IDC, I'm probably forgetting someone, but they've been publishing research on the topic of social. Initially, it was social media from a marketing perspective, but you have to remember for a decade, my buyer was marketing. So I got to see how marketing was shifting to be more digital and social as a response to where the buyer was. We know that the buyer is digitally driven, socially connected, mobile, empowered. We know that. Marketing has had to adapt and adjust because they're the front end of that buyer's journey, right? They have to be visible and valuable to the buyer where they're learning. Sales, unfortunately, just didn't get the memo. And they're starting to get the memo, and they're starting to say, okay, if my buyer is in digital and social, shouldn't I be? And if my buyer is allergic to being sold, shouldn't I take a different approach? How about I take an approach of helping my buyer? And so the research shows that social sellers are more likely to make their number, which in sales, the rubber meets the road with revenue. And if you're doing all these great things around social selling and you've got an awesome profile on LinkedIn optimized for the buyer, not the recruiter, if you have a deep, wide network of rich buyers and influencers and your customers and your partner ecosystem, and if you're sharing content and being found by buyers, but you're not closing deals, then there's a problem, right? Ultimately, we have to measure social selling's impact on making the number. That's the true measure. Now, if you have a long sales cycle, 9, 12 months, the measure to revenue could be 9 to 12 months in time. So we start to measure indicators of are they updating their profile? Are they expanding their network? Are they sharing content? Are they listening for social cues? So I can point you to a million resources that can show you the correlation of social selling behavior to revenue results. And I get to work with those companies every day. So the data is in. You can't ignore it, or you can, but you're not going to be in business. But the data is in. Social selling has a direct impact on pipeline, revenue, customer lifetime value, renewals, and customer advocacy.
Excellent. In fact, what we might do is, Joe, if there are one or two of either articles you've written or others that have the specifics on it, we'll get them in the show notes too. So
Perfect.
Pass them on. But that's really good. Elise, did you want to add to that, or I'll go to my next one?
Yeah, no, I guess the next question, and you may have been about to dive into this, but I think we know the data's there. We know we need to do it. If say that I'm Bob, who hadn't started yet with social selling, how do I start? What do I do? It's so intimidating if you haven't started doing it yet. So how do I know where to begin?
Yeah. I look at social selling from an individual perspective. I'm Bob. I'm in sales. My call, email, call, email, call, email routine is resulting in ignore, delete, ignore, delete, ignore, delete by my buyers. I cannot reach my buyers. So I'm Bob, and I'm like, what do I do? I look at it from that perspective. But more holistically, as an organization, as a sales leader who has a team of Bobs who aren't making their number, what do I need to do as a sales leader? And I think Bob can start to take steps to learn the mindset of the modern seller, the skill set of the modern seller, the enabling tools of the modern seller. But realistically, if Bob's company doesn't get on board, Bob's efforts are not going to be as successful. Because what happens is Bob starts to use social to build his brand, to grow his network, to share content, to engage in the social conversation. And Bob's sales leader's like, Bob, what the hell are you doing? You need to be calling. You need to be emailing. And so there's a disconnect. But Bob knows he needs to make the number. So I would say there's tons of, Google's my best friend. You can Google social selling. You can Google social selling training. You can Google social selling best practices. You can Google 10 ways to optimize my LinkedIn profile for the buyer. But I think you need to have some structure and some rigor and some process. And I think it really does start with, I need to develop these skills. I need to get comfortable with these new tools. And most people are on LinkedIn, but they don't know that LinkedIn is an incredible database, 414 million business professionals that they can go sort through. They don't know that on their profile they need to optimize with keywords that will resonate with the buyer. So, this isn't a pitch for linking into sales whatsoever, but as someone who needs to know what's going on in the social selling world, I actually took the 2 free training courses that Linking into Sales offers.
Yay! Thank you.
I think I was the first person
You were
to complete both of those courses. And I'm supposedly a guru, a ninja, an expert. But I always want to be learning. And I learned things in those courses that I didn't even know how to do or why to do it. So, someone who's been doing this and is now speaking around the world about it, if I can still learn by taking some pretty basic intro courses that are table stakes, you gotta invest in the skills. You gotta have coaching. You have to have mentoring. You gotta get started. You can't wait anymore.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thanks for mentioning that base training. I want to just say that Greg and I chose to take the best of our paid fundamental class and build it all into that fundamental program. So we held no stop. We kept going, Greg, should we be giving all this away? And Greg's view was, like you said, these are the table stakes today. We got to get everyone on board and using it and understand the fundamentals so their LinkedIn profile doesn't look like a lame data sheet, desperately hoping for a job, and is a real customer-facing profile. So thank you, and thanks for being the first to get through it. And yeah, exactly, you're the winner of it, and it's socialselling.training, so site will have it in there as well. Greg, exciting to see you on. Great to have you here, and we'll let you just say hello. We're right in the middle, and I'm going to dig in with the next question if you say hi.
Yeah, hey, how's it going? Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. Am I good?
Yep.
Good.
Yeah, hey, good to see you, Jill. Thankfully I had a meeting cancellation, which allowed me to get over here. So I thought Martin was going to be here. I guess I was very wrong. But we're all good. We get this episode. Thank God for the internet, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Very good.
Excellent, excellent. So in the things you talked about, Jill, and Greg, will have you chime in also with the tip now that you're here later. But in this piece with the social selling, what do you recommend? I'm somebody that said, okay, I'm going to say this has come to me. He says, look, I've been in sales all my life. I put off that LinkedIn and the other things, and I'm realizing I got to start somewhere. And I heard social selling's big. You got to tell me where to walk before I run. And what would be your answer for that, Jill, to start out?
Yeah. I mean, so I've created this framework, if you will, for becoming a social seller. And so for a social seller, there are 4 practices, principles, daily habits, routines that you need to develop. And this really becomes a daily routine, right? You've got to embed social into your existing sales process, methodology, behaviors, routines, activities. Like you've got to, initially social, especially if it's not something that you're real comfortable with, it's kind of like water, right? Like water is good for you. You need to drink 8 ounces a day, but you got to remind yourself, and you got to oh, I'm on number 2, I got to get number 3 glass of water. But social needs to become like air. It needs to become just like something that you do, that is just part of, I don't hear a name today without wanting to go to LinkedIn and look up that person, because I want context of who that person is. I want to understand their identity, like where they've worked, where they went to university, what skills they have, where they live. I want to understand their relationships. I want to know to whom they're connected, what mutual connections we have. I want to know what groups they're a member of. I want to know who they're following on Twitter so I can get a sense of who they listen to, who they trust. And I want to understand their interest. And I can see what they're sharing, what they're engaging with, and I can start to understand who this person is. So if you're in sales and you're trying to figure out how to get started, how you look on the web is really important. So it really is, look at your social presence through the eyes of the customer. Where are my glasses? I usually have a prop. I usually have a pair of oh, here they are. Look at your profiles through the eyes of your customer, right? And say, do I look like someone who is credible? Do I look like someone who is expert? Do I look like someone who is clear? Do I look like someone who is trustworthy? Do I look like someone who can generate value for this customer? So look at it through the eyes of your customer and clean up your social presence and start to really demonstrate the value that you're able to generate for your customers. Know, like, trust used to be how business was done. It's not enough anymore. I can know you, I can like you, and I can trust you, but if I can't get value from you, I can't buy from you. Because there's just so much more choice today that I need to go where value is. Know, like, trust is table stakes. So 1 is, how do you look? What's your digital presence? 2 is your network. Your network is your net worth. ABC, always be connecting. Business cards are LinkedIn connections. They're new people to follow on Twitter, right? So I met a guy at a dog park yesterday. I took Toby. Here's little Toby.
Hey, Toby.
I took Toby to the dog park yesterday, and I'm sitting there, I'm talking to this guy, and we're talking about innovation and disruptive trends, and he's in marketing, and he worked at Oracle, and I had worked at Oracle, and so he's he said, well, you can go to my website and see some of the videos that I've created. And I said, website schmebschneit. I don't go to websites. I can't stay connected. I can't engage with you on your website. I'm going to go to LinkedIn, and I'm going to connect with you on LinkedIn, because we are forever linked if we're connected on LinkedIn. And I'm going to go find you on Twitter. I'm going to follow you on Twitter. Website schmebschneit, right? So the network is really important. And I'll stop there so we can have more engaging, but there's a whole rhythm, there's a whole routine, there's a whole process, there are daily habits, and you don't form these by listening to a single podcast. You guys have been doing podcasts since 2011, right?
Yeah,
Years.
Yeah, right.
But I'm not going to learn how to be a social seller by just listening to your podcast.
Yeah.
They're great when I'm working out at the gym and woo. They're awesome. But I'm not going to learn how to be a social seller just by listening to the podcast. I need to change my behavior.
Well, one of the things you just brought up is I'm going to Google you, and in any of these beginning levers, they haven't created enough content to get into Google semantic search as an identity yet. And their website isn't going to be enough because they're hiding behind their brand or logo or something like that. So I think one of the things in the starting thing is you got to get some presence on LinkedIn at a personal, professional level, not just I won the margarita contest on Facebook. So
Right.
that's a beginning piece that I hear in that. Greg, you want to add something? And now I have another question, or Elise?
Yeah, no, I think, Jill, I think you bring up a great point about, how we kind of do this, those who have been practicing social selling here for a little while, is that we kind of just, we get married over social, I guess is probably the best way to look at it. You follow them on, or you connect with them on LinkedIn, follow them on Twitter, maybe add Google Plus to it. They got Snapchat, follow them on Snapchat, or even, on Facebook to a degree. And your point about websites, you're very right. I'll be honest, I sometimes have trouble actually publishing a new post. I think it's been a year since I published one on my own blog, but I'll publish on LinkedIn because I get better engagement there. And I think what we're realizing, or at least what we've kind of known along, and what's been articulated pretty well actually by corporate executive board, was this whole notion of insight, and which is another level beyond thought leadership. And I'd love to hear, what you think. I imagine you read the book, The Challenger Customer, or at least, have.
I blogged about it.
Right. So
on LinkedIn, so I can get engagement.
There we go. So we'll link to that in the show notes on this
good.
post. So if anyone wants to see it, we'll make sure we link out to it if they aren't connected with Jill already. But I really do that whole point about hitting or finding insight with your customers and helping them kind of unlearn what they've known, defeat status quo, and start learning, these new insights on how we can do it better is pretty important. I think that we can learn a lot from social selling, in particular, to help us guide our customers along that route. But what are your thoughts around insight?
Oh, thought leadership is, again, going back to know, like, trust. Thought leadership is table stakes. If you don't have that down, you're just behind. And it doesn't mean you can't figure it out and get caught up, but we've moved beyond thought leadership, right? So now it is insights. Let me be very specific, because I think if I can give examples, the aha or the oh shit, like, it just happens with examples, right? So, I'll try to be brief. It's a challenge I have. At least I'm self-aware, right? So an insight would be, I'm engaged in an opportunity to build a relationship, hopefully that drives some revenue, with Brocade. And Brocade's a multi-billion-dollar company, and they're going through a process of there's the new internet, right? The whole infrastructure behind the internet needs to be rebuilt because of the massive scale at which we're all using the internet. But beyond that, I've got the gentleman who is really the executive sponsor for social selling within Brocade, and we're building a relationship. I'm practicing excessive generosity with him by sharing with him research reports about social selling. I'm sharing with him blogs that he could read about social selling. He gets to the point where he wants to introduce me to his CMO, who I'm actually already connected to on LinkedIn, but our relationship is weak, right? So he sends this really brilliant email introducing us, and in the email he copies another head of sales, the head of sales enablement and training, and the HR leader who is responsible for sales, HR for sales, the sales department. And so I don't want to immediately send a response because I've got the CMO on an email. I go and I Google her. And I find a couple different interviews of her, and one of them I really particularly like. I think it's just spot on. And I pick up from it. She says, here's the way I like to run projects. Think big, start small, move fast. That's the CMO's words. Think big, start small, move fast. Mm-hmm. So when I respond to Anthony's email with Christine, the CMO, on the email, of course I thank Anthony. Then I say to Christine, I welcome the opportunity to help Brocade think big, start small, and move fast with social selling. And I'm pleased that Anthony has copied leaders from the right functions: marketing, sales enablement, and HR to make social selling immersive. Another word she uses. Mm-hmm. Marketing provides the fuel for the social selling machine. They're involved in helping create, organize, distribute, and measure engagement of all digital assets. I'm not trying to pitch her on Jill Rowley. I'm trying to show her that I'm doing my research so that I can be relevant, so I can build a relationship, so I can help them, right? In the same thread, the HR woman that he had copied, Judy, I've read a report from Forrester on the B2B Salesforce digital reboot. You need a new kind of seller. If know, like, and trust isn't enough anymore, and you need to lead with insight and value, getting to where you ask the question, right? I need to be able to provide my buyers, my potential buyers, insight into their world. Not my world, their world. So this paper that Forrester wrote is all about the kinds of sellers you need to be successful today. The characteristics, the qualities, the attributes of the salespeople you need to hire and train to. She's in HR, that's her role. So I share with her via email. I didn't have to tweet it. I didn't have to call her and say, here's the piece of email or piece of content. I used the channel where the conversation was happening, and I sent to her this report. So insight, it's hard. It's time consuming. It ain't easy. But that is where, and if you're selling a commodity product, then this is not the conversation for you, right? If it's transactional and you're competing only on price, all of this insight and consultative selling and solving problems, this almost doesn't apply. But if you're selling something that's a considered purchase, there are multiple stakeholders involved, this is the kind of selling model you have to move to.
You're right. Actually, you make a great point about simple sale versus complex sale. Exactly. I think that social selling has a fit in. It kind of works differently on both sides, because if we have with complex sale, it does require a little bit more relationship building. Definitely having that insight. But then on the simple sale, it's more about knowing where that one or two particular consumers are at. Usually, it is very transactional. And is probably more in building loyalty as opposed to just trying to continue to sell over and over again. And I think we've seen from some of the other consumer-driven industries the adoption of their own definition of what social selling is, which I don't want to get into because it kind of touches on some areas which both Elise and Martin know that I'm not very much a fan of. So
I see a lot of bad social selling where it's really there. And as someone who is evangelizing social selling, I really try to not do social marketing, because I don't want to confuse people. The difference between social marketing and social selling, there's a big difference. And I don't automate any content sharing. I'm not saying that if you do, you're a bad person or you're doing it wrong, but I'm trying to be a role model for practitioners, sales leaders, sales enablement, marketing. So I'm trying to practice social selling, not social marketing. And I'm not outsourcing my social activity to anybody. I'm not buying followers so it looks like I'm more influential than I am. So a lot of what you're hearing sometimes is more about modern trickery than it is about building authentic relationships. And it's more about how do you do it quickly before anyone figures out that you're actually tricking the system. And I don't believe in any of that. That's just not the world in which I live.
Yeah. Elise, over to you to add something or yourself?
Yeah. So, Jill, you mentioned about needing a new kind of salesperson on your team, right? Somebody who's going to understand social selling, going to understand how to do it in order to be competitive in the environment that people buy in today. So I'm curious if I'm leading a sales team of, we'll say dinosaurs for lack of a better word, right? What if I have a bunch of veteran sales professionals who were awesome, like in the 90s, early 2000s, and I'm having a hard time getting them to buy in to this.
Yeah.
What do I do aside from canning all of them and starting fresh?
Some of them need to go, right? Like it just, if they can't adapt and evolve, and you have to, I look at it again, where are my glasses? I'm going to look at it through the eyes of my customer. If my customers are digitally driven, socially connected, learning in social, my sales team needs to be there too. If my customers aren't, this is not urgent. The building's not on fire, right? So I'm not saying every single salesperson has to be the excellent social seller, because there are industries where this is just not, the house is on fire. If you're not in social, you won't be visible and valuable to your buyer, right? So look at it from that perspective to determine how urgent this is. If you realize this is where our reps need to be, right? So then we can get into the more tenured sales professionals who have the experience and the business acumen and the situational fluency, and they know how to run a sales process, and they know how to negotiate, and they know how to create internal stakeholder alignment, but they just don't have the social down. Then you can, obviously they need to go through a digital social selling skills development program. They need to have coaching. They need to have mentoring. They could be paired with someone who is more digitally savvy, native oriented, who doesn't have maybe the domain expertise and the situational fluency. And now that you've got that reverse mentoring happening, where the digitally native is learning about business and the business professional is learning about social and digital, so you can do that. It does come down to the right environment to give them these new skills: how to use technology, how to use data, how to think more like a marketer. Because when you're optimizing for keywords, that's marketing. That's not sales. That's marketing in the mindset of the more traditional seller. So I think it starts first with really building the business case for the why. They need to understand why they need to go to the gym. And not go to the gym and just go to the gym, but they need to go to the gym and they need to get on the treadmill, they need to lift weights, they need to sweat it out, and they need to do it on a consistent and regular basis. So I think you've got to teach them and help them understand the why. If they don't get their aha or their oh shit moment, then teaching them the skills and giving them the tools, you're not going to get the change that you need. So I really think building a real strong business case, showing them tenured reps like them who have made the transition, who are on the journey, and helping them understand what exactly they did. I think those are all things that you can do to help these more tenured sales professionals get more comfortable in the digital and social world.
That's awesome.
Excellent.
I love the idea of the pairing too, kind of the reverse mentoring. I don't see many companies doing that. I think that's so brilliant.
It works because the young gals get to be paired with someone who's really made the number and has deep relationships, has subject matter expertise, and the more tenured folks get to be paired with someone who thinks I put myself, even though I'm a Gen X, I really feel like I'm more millennial. I feel like my insatiable thirst for learning, my passion for teaching, I will be at the gym and I will listen to LinkedIn, linking into selling podcast. I'll listen to like 2 episodes. I'll tweet, right? This is, Elise, thank you. I discovered Rory Vaden from you, from the episode that you guys did with him. And the whole building trust online before the sales conversation can begin. I actually quoted Rory in my most recent post on LinkedIn. I discovered him via you guys. So thank you for that. But you've got to have this mentality of always be learning. But you know what I did? I did my research on Rory. I started to read Take the Stairs, right? It totally makes sense. I'm not going to get skinny if I keep taking the elevator or the escalator, right? So I'd start to do all this research. I subscribe to his content. I listen to a couple other, I watch his TED Talk. I then invite him to connect on LinkedIn. Rory's now part of my network, right? We're tweeting it up on Twitter. But that came from me in a mentality of always be learning, always be connecting, giving back, right? Putting the spotlight on Rory and his message, putting the spotlight on you guys and the podcast episode that you did with him. That's the mentality.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I've got one thing. That's excellent. And one thing interests me is what do you see are some of the biggest challenges people are facing in getting results with social selling as a professional?
It's not a short-term thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I pick up the phone, I dial a number, I get someone to answer, or I don't. They answer, we have a conversation that goes well, or it doesn't. It's a linear. Like, this thing is much more linear, and it's immediate. On social, it took me a while to listen to that podcast that you guys did with Rory, to then go and listen to his TED Talk that he did, to then subscribe to his content on his website, to then, at the right time, send him a personalized invite to connect on LinkedIn, right? So it's not immediate. It's not, pop a pill and, ooh, I feel good, right? It's just not. And we're so impatient in just everything, and in particular in sales, because we have a number hanging over our head. And if we don't make the number, we're not going to have employment. So I think one of the biggest challenges is just a mindset of, this is an investment. This is a long-term approach. This is something, I don't send a tweet and close a deal. So that long-term mindset is probably one of the biggest challenges I find.
I think that's excellent, because as I'm thinking about that, I'm thinking, sales, these kind of sales with social selling, it's not about quote unquote hooking up, right? So this is more about, you got to develop that relationship, take it back to a personal level for a second. I mean, you don't automatically go from I meet somebody on the first date to marriage on the next day, unless some cultures they do, but at least here we don't do that, right? And I guess if you're asking a business to make a significant investment in your product or solution, you should be willing to spend that time to invest in developing the relationship, even prior to making that initial contact, the initial one-to-one contact. So I love that. But sales not being a hookup game is probably a good point to take away from that, right?
It's not a swipe left or swipe right.
Tinder, right? Exactly.
I learned that from my. I have no direct experience.
I see these things kind of come up in the emails. I get, look how Tinder engaged their app. I'm like, no, I don't want to see that. I'm not interested.
One of the things, if I can ask Jill, on an article I read about you, talked about the fact that software as a service is a long-term partnership thing. So sales incentives need to be structured around making customers happy so they stick around and keep paying. So I'm curious, looking at the customer retention side of things, how should reps be utilizing social selling to help with that aspect after the sale is made?
Well, a bigger conversation to have, and let me make sure I come back to that, Elise, because I want to answer the question. A lot of times I never answer your questions because I get so like discombobulated. But one of the problems that we have in sales is that we sometimes structure our sales teams into hunters and farmers. Your customers don't want to be hunted and they don't want to be farmed, right? We need a new language in sales that isn't so just awful for the customer. They don't want to be prospected. They don't want to be a target in your database. So in terms of the question again, because again, I've just now lost it. What was the question?
Oh, I forgot. I liked the farmer-hunter analogy.
The advocacy, the long term. So, and a lot of times the fact that salespeople leave after the deal's closed is based on how they're compensated, right? So one of my desires in sales is to see, let's compensate the salesperson for getting the deal closed, because that is, that's a big effort and we got to do that. But why don't we have a portion of the compensation be variable based on the customer saying that they've achieved success and that they're willing to tell other people about it, right? So this component, why don't we compensate for what behavior we want to drive? We want to drive deepening relationships with customers where the customer becomes our biggest advocate because we're the biggest advocate of our customer. You don't ask your customers to be advocates for you unless you've been an advocate for them. Mm-hmm. So I would like to see compensation models change. And HubSpot is a great example. Mark Roberge, and I learned this on a podcast that I was listening to at the gym. Mark Roberge at HubSpot in the early days, they had an attrition problem. They were acquiring a bunch of customers and then they weren't renewing. And so he thought that he had a customer success problem, like that the customer success reps who were really good were retaining and renewing customers, and the ones that weren't so good were losing customers out the back door. When he did the data analysis, he found it wasn't at a customer success level, it was at a sales rep, the rep who closed the initial deal. And so he changed the comp model. And reps who had high renewal got paid 4x than reps who didn't. And then over time, if you improved your renewal rate, your compensation, moved up. But he paid salespeople differently based on whether the customers that they brought on stayed. That's a modern sales leader.
Mm-hmm. Yes, which of course is going to keep them in the game too with the customer. I think that's an excellent point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that.
But if you guys think about, we're talking about social selling, we're talking about transformation. We're actually talking about how do we transform our organizations to be customer-centered, to be customer-centric, to be customer-obsessed, to look at things through the eyes of our customer first and always, not through the eyes of our commission check or our stock price, and what I'm trying to do is much bigger than social as a channel, as a tool, but it's how do customers want to buy, and we need to sell the way they want to buy. That's really what I'm talking about.
Let's go ahead, Greg. You have something?
Yes.
And now I'd like to go and talk a little bit about Twitter.
All right. Well, before we jump to Twitter, let me ask you one question. Yeah, I mean, you're out there in San Francisco, Jill, and do you have a fairly good relationship with a number of the folks over there at LinkedIn? So, do you think that LinkedIn, being the social selling platform of choice for most folks, at least for given the number of members that they have, do you think that the sales organization at LinkedIn is an effective social selling has an effective social selling structure in place?
It's a great question, and I have a fair relationship with LinkedIn. Let me start with, I think LinkedIn, and I understand all the reasons why, they're not ecosystem friendly. They are not an ecosystem friendly company. They are not partner friendly. They are not, they're not Salesforce. Salesforce and Mark Benioff and the App Exchange and the community and what he does. Like when you go to Dreamforce, there are 300 plus other vendors who are sponsors. When you go to LinkedIn's event, it's LinkedIn. All LinkedIn, only LinkedIn, and in fact, they don't even let people like you, Greg, and you, Martin, attend their events because you compete for the dollars that their customers have in their budgets. So I think it's a problem, and I'm willing to go on record. I'm willing to piss them off because I don't like the approach. I don't think it's a very good approach. I think in our world we should be putting the customer first, and they say that they're putting the member first, but I don't believe it. Let me go to your question. In terms of, do their salespeople social sell? I think that they have definitely a lot of salespeople who have really embraced these concepts. But I think from a culture perspective, I still feel like at the end of the day, they have a lot of enterprise salespeople who are looking to sell licenses of LinkedIn Sales Navigator and not necessarily look at it more holistically of social selling transformation and what's required, the cross-functional alignment, the culture of the organization, the training, right? So I was texting with one of their, I should be careful not to, but this very large company who, is one of their largest customers, I asked them, are they getting their training from LinkedIn? And he's like, we tried, we really tried, we really, really tried, and we couldn't make it work. And so I said, okay, well, that's fair. Is LinkedIn going to build their training program to be social selling training? Are they going to partner with you guys because you're building something to go to market with? And there's just not an ecosystem play. And I see a lot of their reps focused on getting a bunch of licenses for Navigator sold up front without the proper plan in place to really help the company with transformation. I probably just said way more than I should, but that's who I am.
Well, Jill, I want to say something on that because, I joined LinkedIn in 2004 and worked. We were built. They were really starting in the beginning to open up to bring in other trainers, and were vetting me to bring in. And then Greg and I teamed up around 2006 or 7, I think we met and moved on for that. And I'm really a little concerned about the future if they don't find a way to get more connected to the grassroots user. An example is some of the attrition we're seeing with the groups right now, the activity. You can only kill off so many programs. I'm personally, I'm an advocate of what LinkedIn stands for, and that's why I'm so tough on them. Because I believe in their principle, I think sometimes more than they do, and in the idea of networking the professional world and giving tools for solving problems. I think they get an an A+ in enhancing people's career in the initial, especially 2008, and they get a C- in the micro business, and they haven't really tried it. But I'm very concerned with they killed off I think it was called Answers. Now I'm forgetting if it's Questions or Answers. My gosh, that was some of the richest experiences I had of networking and really meeting people possible. And if they make it so you must only follow one rule to benefit from it, I think it's going to really get more people to drop off. So I'd like to talk a little bit about what do you think they should do with groups to save it? Because this has come up, and it's something Greg and I have had an off-the-air conversation on, and I think it's I think they need to start, doing some soul searching and reinventing fast, or it's an open ground for somebody to pick it up.
Yeah, I think I probably can't speak very intelligently about groups specifically and what they need to do there, because I've looked at my behavior. I'm not even active in any groups anymore because it isn't valuable to me anymore. It used to be something that was really valuable to me, and I was participating in groups, but the value is not there anymore. And so, I think LinkedIn needs to, and again, I understand why they're not partner friendly, why they're not ecosystem friendly, because what you don't want is a bunch of technology companies sucking in the LinkedIn data and making it possible for salespeople to do really bad things with that data. When I was at Oracle, and believe me, I never wanted to be like Oracle. I went to Oracle to change Oracle because I think Oracle's culture sucks. I think Oracle is Oracle-centered, Oracle-centric, Oracle-obsessed. I don't think Oracle is customer-centered, centric, and obsessed. And I think the culture is really one individual, Larry Ellison, who is just, too far removed from the reality of the world in his, personal wealth and accumulation of whatever he wants to accumulate and dominate. But I wanted Oracle. I said, God, if I was Safra Katz and I was making my next acquisition, I'd acquire LinkedIn, because LinkedIn has the data. The data, it is the richest, most accurate, most complete database of business professionals. If you think about the ability to go and query 414 million global people and just really use that data, I was like, Oracle should acquire LinkedIn. But on the other side, I didn't want Oracle to acquire LinkedIn because Oracle would ruin LinkedIn, right? People would leave the network. They would leave the network because of what people could do with the data and how they could misuse, my contact information and start to do interruptive marketing. And I'd be getting messages from all over the place, which I already do, right? I get so many horrible messages on LinkedIn. I have over 1,000 invites in my inbox that I will never accept. So I think LinkedIn needs to think more about what its members need and want and how they can generate value, but they're not listening. I don't feel like they're listening to ecosystem that could help them really think more holistically about how to make the network more valuable. So it's kind of a tough question, but
might be another show. I'm noticing our time. We're having so much fun. I want to wrap up with Elise, any other questions you have, and then we'll wrap it up. But my gosh, looks like we need to just create another show on some of these subtopics too. So.
Yeah, let's bring her back. She's a badass. So
hashtag badass.
Hashtag badass. I guess the final question I would have for you, Jill, since you're so deeply immersed in this space, is what's next? When you look at social selling, what do you see on the horizon?
Yeah, I see that we're going to start to look at it more at a company level. So I think we've seen lots of great progress at the individual rep level of reps saying, you know what, this is the way to go. And I'm going to go into linking into sales, and I'm going to sign up as an individual to go through modifying my LinkedIn profile, 17 modules, invest that time. I'm going to go take that intro to Twitter course. I'm going to get on Twitter. So as a rep, I know that this is the direction I need to go, and I'm going to start doing it. But I know, and I see it happening, we're going to see more companies say, this is something we need to do at a corporate level. And we need to marshal the appropriate functions within the organization to look at how we drive transformation at a company level, where we look at both marketing, sales enablement training. We look at HR, so we start to hire the right people with the right skills, or at least the characteristics of the modern seller. I think we're going to see, much like we did in marketing automation. So I've actually seen this movie before. I was employee number 13 at Eloqua. I helped, really define the category of marketing automation, where people, the bright shiny object, they bought the tool, they didn't have the data, they didn't have the people with the right skill, they didn't have content to nurture, they didn't have scoring systems, and then they started to say, ooh, back it up, and they said, we need help. And then the consultants, the service providers start to really come in and guide organizations on the strategy, on the operational plan, on the skills, the roles, the response. I think we're going to see companies invest in how do we transform our sales organization. I think training, we're going to see a lot more companies investing in a mechanized, systematic, programmatic, prescriptive training of the organization. I think it's actually going to slow down LinkedIn Sales Navigator deals, because they're going to realize it's not the fool with a tool, right? We need to think much more holistically. So I think we're going to actually see much bigger investment in the category.
Outstanding. Excellent. Well, Greg, I'm going to let you wrap it up for us. And if you have a closing tip or something, we'll pass it over. Great question, Elise. And over to you, Greg.
All right. Well, first, thank you very much for joining us today, Jill. I hope we get to have you back again for a future episode. We'll work that out if you have the time. If you enjoyed, talking with us, we certainly did. So
I've been waiting to get on, Greg. So thank you. I'll come back for sure. I'm like, they've been doing this since 2011, and why the hell haven't I been invited?
That's right.
So I will come back.
I guess it's a bit, it's about time. It's definitely long overdue. So let's have you on a few more times this year, because I think that you provide some very, very good insight for our audience, and I'm sure they would love to learn a lot more about you as well. So let's go and wrap up real quick with a fast tip. We mentioned a couple episodes ago that LinkedIn was going to start playing YouTube videos automatically in their feed, and this actually I've got this feature. So now when you start sharing content into LinkedIn, particularly YouTube, share the YouTube video directly onto LinkedIn, and it will start to autoplay. And I think that's incredible for getting views on those videos. Go out to your company's YouTube channel if they have one. Pull some of that video out and share it directly into your feed. Don't forget to add it to your professional gallery as well, under your experience section in there. And if you want some more information about that, don't forget to head out to socialselling.training and sign up for our course. And we'll show you a little bit more on how to do that. Other than that, there's been some financial information that has definitely come out about LinkedIn and how their stock price kind of got cut in half. And I think we alluded to a little bit earlier in our discussion about groups. Me personally, I think the disengagement in groups has actually driven down the quarterly active users in LinkedIn and has actually caused users to disengage. A friend of mine actually forwarded me a notice saying the LinkedIn group moderators community, which is a group that LinkedIn established for group moderators, is going to be shutting down. So it looks like that they're kind of, actually that group kind of turned into this giant bitch fest anyway, because everyone was so upset about what they've done to groups that it turned into this turned into a bitch fest. And they said in their email to go forward all of your questions over to help. So,
hold on, Greg.
Yeah.
To reduce the complaints from our customers, we have instigated a solution of disconnecting the help phone. That's what it looks like.
Brilliant
We're
move.
going to ignore you.
Yeah, that's right. Hold your hands up. Go la la la.
Yep.
Brilliant move from LinkedIn. I want to say thank you to Neil Isaacs for actually forwarding me over that email.
Yeah.
Neil is actually a friend of ours, a friend of the show. Actually works with Elise with the Triangle Sales Think Tank, and is an account executive over with Time Warner Cable here in the Triangle area. So thank you, Neil, for that. Other than that, thank you very much for watching the show. If you have any questions or comments, by all means, please hit us up on a comment on the blog post. Tweet us at linking in the number 2 sales, or to Martin or Elise or I. You can find us on Twitter. Leave a comment if you see the show on LinkedIn, or if you see it on Twitter. Leave a comment there. We're everywhere. Come like us on Facebook, wherever you want to find us. Wherever you are, we try to be there, and if we're not there, we'll be there. So
Excellent.
thank you very much for watching the show. Thanks, Martin. Thanks, Elise. And thank you very much, Jill. Y'all have a fantastic week.